Hello everyone, this is Mrs. Kostelecki. Welcome to Algebra. Today we will be talking about rate of change. Another word for that is slope. So here's three different ways we look at slope. Slope is, we use the letter M to represent slope in math, so keep that in mind. And then also a lot of times in science, use what we call change of y over change of x. This typically comes from tables. Another way we look at slope is using a formula. And usually when we use the formula, they come from points. So if I give you 2 points and I want you to find the slope, this is what you would do. And then we also talk about rise over run, which this comes from a graph. So those are the three main ways that we look at slope. From a table, and then here I'm going to repeat myself, but here's our three different ways again. And then I'm also including a new one called from an equation. If we have our equation look a certain way where y is by itself, isolated by itself on one side of the equation, then we can specifically identify m, which is always a number in front of x, and that is going to be our slope. So we're going to go through some examples. And just to kind of reiterate that this triangle symbol right here means change. That is the Greek letter delta. And so we use that to represent a change in our data. So finding the rate of change from the table below. What we're going to do is we're going to take a look at change of y. So this is this section right here. Change of y over change of x. So first I have to identify how are my y values changing? From 5 to 6, I'm going up 1. 6 to 7, I'm going up 1. These should stay really consistent. These should be the same. So plus 1 every time. So my change of y equals a positive 1. And then that's over my change of x, which is equal to, and then these right here are changing by 0. If you see this, then you have to be careful because you have to understand that you cannot divide by 0. We can't divide by 0. So that means that our slope is going to be undefined. That's what we call that. All right, our next question here from a table again. So we're still using delta y, delta x, because it's change of y over change of x. My change of x is equal to, I'm going to go up 50. So this is going positive 50. And I'm just double checking that all of these go up by 50, and they do. So my change of x is 50. My change of y is 30 to 42 is 12. 42 to 54 is 12. I'm just subtracting 54 minus 12. 66 minus 54, again, is 12. So my change of y is positive 12 because they're going up. Now, you have to be careful because your formula is going to be change of y over change of x, which means this is 12 over 50. And we always reduce our fraction, always. So what number can go into both 12 and 50? For sure, 2 can. So we'll just start there and divide both of those by 2. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 50 divided by 2 is 25. And when I double check those, no other number goes into 6 and 25. So my slope is equal to 6/25. Now I have 2 points. So when I look at these 2 points, I am going to be using the formula version of slope. So you want to be careful how I label these. I label my points because I think it helps. I always start out by just labeling them x and y because every point is x and y. This is my first point, so I put 1s. This is my second point, so I put 2s. It does not matter if you want this to be your first point or your second point. So if this is your first, that's your second. Now, my slope formula, it kind of looks like a face or something like that. I don't know. I put empty parentheses in and the minus sign in because negative signs will give you trouble here with the slope formula if you're not super careful. So I always substitute into parentheses. So my y2 is my first number that I put on top. So that's -7. And then my y1 is my second number. So I'm going to subtract my second y, so -5. On the bottom are my x's. So I'm going to subtract my x's. And since I started with -7, this is y2, I have to start with -2, which is x2. So -2, and then minus is part of the formula. So I have to put in a -1. Now I have to double check my signs. So I have -7. This is minus and minus. So this is two negative signs next to each other. That's going to be plus. And then -2 minus a -1 is -2 plus 1. So I will get -2 in the numerator and -1 in the denominator, which simplifies down to 2/1. You can write 2/1 or you can write 2. It doesn't matter. But the signs do matter. If it's a negative divided by negative, make sure to write positive because negative divided by negative is a positive. Now, if you don't like using the formula, one thing that you can do is if you just always remember that you're subtracting your y's on top, which is still your change of y's, right? And if you subtract your x's on bottom, which is still your change of x's, this formula is good enough as long as you always start with the same point for your y and for your x. If you switch them around, you're going to have trouble. But notice how I always started with this point. So I start with -7 for my y's, I start with -2 for my x's, and that's going to work just fine in my formula. All right. So next one, I'm again always going to substitute into parentheses. I am not kidding you. This is going to help a ton if you do this because you just substitute your numbers in. Now, I am just going to go in a different direction because I feel like it. I want you guys to see that it works both ways. So this time, this is my x and this is my y, x and y. That y kind of looks like an x. There we go. So I'm going to start with this y instead, and I'm going to subtract that y. So 3 minus 7. Then I'm going to start with this x because if I started with this one, I have to start with this one as well. So my next x is -1, and I'm going to subtract 5. So 3 minus 7 is equal to -4. -1 minus 5 is equal to -6. So when I simplify, that's positive 4 6, and 2 can go into both of those again. So I'm going to divide 4 by 2 and 6 by 2. That'll give me 2/3. So my slope is 2/3. From a graph. All right. So I thought this was kind of cute right here. You have to rise before you can run. So true when it comes to slope. The rise is always in the numerator, always. So it's different than when you graph a point, because when you graph a point, you always go left or right and then up or down. This is different. So when you're looking at your slope, you're looking for from one point to another, what's your rise and what's your run. So if I start here to get to this point straight up, so I'm just going straight up from that point, my rise is going up 1, 2, 3. So my rise equals 3. And that's over my run. My run is equal to 1. So overall, this is still my slope, m equals. So m is equal to 3. If you write 3/1, that's fine, but you don't have to. 3 divided by 1 is 3. Now, sometimes people go a different direction, and what's really cool is it works both ways. So I'm going to choose a different color here. If I start at this point, and I go down, you have to use negatives if you go down. So the difference here is my rise is going to be -3. But then I also go left 1. So what happens is negative divided by negative is still a positive 3/1. So it doesn't matter which point you start with as long as you're careful with your negatives. Going left and down are always negative. So I'm going to write that down. Left and down are negative. Okay, so let's try another one. If I start with this point, I go down to this line right here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So I went down 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and that was down, so it's -4. And then I went to the right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places. And that was to the right. So this is positive. So if my rise is -4 and my run is positive 6, this is going to stay negative because a negative divided by a positive is a negative. But I do have to simplify that fraction. That's going to be 2/3. So my slope is -2/3. Now that negative sign It doesn't really matter if you put it with the 2, the 3, or out front. All of those would work because if we do this, it's still negative. If we do this, it's negative. And if we do this, sorry, that's supposed to be like right in the middle, that's also going to work. So any of those versions work. Typically, since we went down 4, your x is going to be negative there. But you can also, if I started with this point, I would go up 4. So that would be 4. And then I would go to the left 6. And instead, that would give me positive 4 over negative 6, which is still going to be negative 2/3. So however direction you go, your negative signs should still be consistent. Now, from an equation, how this works with an equation is the equation y equals mx plus b. We're going to learn a lot about this soon, but this particular equation, as long as y is by itself, if y is by itself, so you have to sometimes solve to get y by itself, the number that is being multiplied times x, so that's called the coefficient, if you remember that name, the coefficient of x is always going to be your slope. So if I look at this, y is by itself. This is the number that's in front of x, so my m equals 4. If y is already solved for, it's super quick. Now, of course, they're not always solved for, so sometimes we have to solve for y. So in this example, this is what I want to solve for is my y. So I'm adding 3x and I'm multiplying by negative 4. So first, I need to subtract 3x for both sides. So I get negative 4y equals 8 minus 3x. It doesn't matter if we write 3x, negative 3x plus 8, or 8 minus 3x. Divide both sides by negative 4. So y equals, remember you have to divide both of these by negative 4. So this is going to be, there we go, 8 divided by negative 4, and then minus 3 over negative 4. This is kind of goofy how I wrote it, but I just wanted to show that both of those get divided by negative 4. So negative 8 divided by 4 is going to be negative 2. Negative divided by negative is going to be positive 3/4 x. So remember, when you have the equation where y is by itself, there's nothing else on this side, the coefficient of x right there is my slope. So m equals 3/4. All right, make sure you fill out your foldable and you take good notes. If there's anything I said or wrote on the slides that's extra, try to find a place in your notebook where you can write those down because they are important to know for algebra and for slope. We'll be doing a lot of practice with this in class, but make sure you have good notes taken so we can get right away into the practice. Thanks for listening, everyone.